perfect road to go down, but I know.
Hey guys, welcome back to my ASMR YouTube channel. I don't know why I keep doing that. My house is really loud today, so I'm trying my best to film and make it relaxing and everything, but if you do hear something in the back, I'm really sorry. I'm trying my best. So before I start, I'm gonna leave a little link or like a time stamp as to when the actual video starts right here, but or somewhere on the screen, because I have a couple stuff that I want to say. All my videos that I've uploaded so far were they were pre-recorded and they were like scheduled to upload, so I never really got to say like a lot of like stuff I was feeling about like this moment in time right now. But thank you so much for 200 and like I think it's like, hold on, let me check. 237 subscribers. That's insane. Like my mind is like blown. I only ever expected like 10 or 20. I'm not even joking. Like so this was like even 100 was like mind blowing to me, and like it's kind of growing really quick. I know, like 200 is like huge, and thank you so much for like subscribing. It means a lot. Second, I hope you guys are doing really well with quarantine and everything. Self-isolation or social distancing. It is kind of tough. I know that I have some days when I just feel like so down about it because I just want to go out and see my friends and see my like, I don't know, I just want to go out and do stuff. So I really hope that if you guys are having trouble with that, I hope it gets better for you. I usually just do some self-care, watch some movies, you know, eat some ice cream. That always puts me in like the best mood, and like I'm okay again. But you know, it's tough. So I hope you guys are doing excellent with that. Also, yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much for 237 subscribers. Like, insane. So yeah, let's get into the video. Today's case is on the Green River Killer. I didn't want to do Ted Bundy because he was kind of like popular and everybody covered that case basically. Well, not everyone, but like, you know, a lot of people covered it. So we're doing the Green River Killer because his case is kind of close, and Ted Bundy actually played a role in like catching him. Once again, I apologize for any background noise. My house is always loud and everybody's awake till like 3 in the morning. Like nobody in this house sleeps. Sorry. I'm just gonna hold my mic like this because then it's easier to edit out background noises. Anyway, without further ado, the Green River Killer. So, forget Ted Bundy. Forget John Wayne Gacy. Forget Richard Ramirez and Jeffrey Dahmer, who were very brutal in their tactics. But nevertheless, like, just forget them, because when it comes to the Green River Killer, his body count is higher than all of them. The serial killer, Gary Leon Ridgway, 2001. Gary Leon Ridgway was born on February 18th, 1949 in Salt Lake City, Utah. He lived in a deprived neighborhood near the SeaTac airport, so if you know where that is. He grew up in a very troubled home. His parents had frequent violent fights and arguments and stuff. His mother was said to be very overbearing. His father was a bus driver, and he frequently complained about prostitutes in the city. Gary was a bedwetter until the age of 13 years old. His mother would be the one to basically clean up after him after these episodes, and this would include like cleaning his genitals and stuff. And he said that this instilled him with warring feelings of hatred and sexual desire for his mother. Yeah. He claimed that he often fantasized about killing his mom, and like many other serial killers, he was known for setting fires and torturing animals. As a young child, Ridgway was tested with an IQ of 82, signifying like this meant that he had a very low intelligence, because an IQ of 82 is pretty low. And his academic performance, his academic performance in school, it was so poor that at one point in high school, he had to repeat a single school year twice. Just to like get grades good enough to pass the class. His classmates at Tyee High School said that he was congenial, but he was very forgettable, so kind of irrelevant. At age 16, he committed his first violent act when he led a 6-year-old boy into the woods and stabbed him in his liver. 6 years old. According to the victim and Ridgway himself, by Ridgway I mean Gary, which is the Green River Killer. So according to the victim, the 6-year-old boy, and Gary himself, Gary walked away laughing after he stabbed him, and he said, "I always wondered what it would be like to kill someone." So, Gary, like his father, developed a very intense hatred for prostitutes. Despite the fact that he frequently used their services. He was a fanatical Christian who was said to cry after church sermons and Bible readings and all that. But as much as he hated prostitutes and everything, he used their work like quite a lot. Like he met with prostitutes quite a lot. He would sleep with them and then he would kill them, which for someone who's so religious is kind of weird. By 18 years old, Ridgway was a poor student. By this I mean that he was basically not academically gifted. He wasn't doing well in school. So he decided to join the Navy. After graduation, he married his high school girlfriend, Claudia Barrows, and he was sent to Vietnam after his wife, Claudia, alone and 19 years old back home, began dating again, and their marriage quickly ended within a year. In 1975, his second wife gave birth to his son, Matthew. In 1981, sometime before he started killing people, women, his second wife, Marcia Winslow, divorced him. Then he met a woman named Judith Mawson in 1985, who became his third wife. Gary Ridgway and Judith Mawson got married in 1988. So, Gary was very religious, and he was also a frequent customer of prostitutes. He killed women and prostitutes for 20 years, and no one caught him. So, now let's begin with the first killings. In the summer of 1982, the bodies of 3 young prostitutes were found near the Green River. They were 30 feet within each other. They were Wendy Caulfield, Deb Bonner, and Giselle Ann Lavorne. They had all died of strangulation. All 3 of them had rocks placed within their private parts to make them sink in the water. 3 days later, more bodies were found near the Green River. 2 bodies were found. They belonged to Marcia Chapman and Cynthia Hines, who were both prostitutes. Detectives were called on scene, and while one of the detectives was pushing through the tall grass near the river, he almost stepped on yet another dead body. This victim had hair that was dyed red, and there were jeans wrapped around her neck. She was face down. She was known to be Opal Mills. She was just a 16-year-old girl. She was a junior in high school. She was not a prostitute. This was when detectives knew that they had a serial killer on their hands. 25 detectives were assigned to the case. 5 women were dead already. Now, let's talk about the first suspect, Melvin Foster. Melvin was a cab driver, and he mostly did late night shifts. When he said he was driving around, he said he would notice a lot of vulnerable girls walking around at night. These girls were prostitutes or runaways or people, like girls that were just lost without a home or anybody, near them. He would accuse other cab drivers. He accused another cab driver of being the killer, but the detectives noticed that he was really trying to involve himself in the case, and this is what made him a suspect. They thought Foster was the Green River killer because he kept on inserting himself into the case. He also admitted in having a connection with most of the girls who had disappeared. He said that when he saw them, he would give them rides in his cab and provide food and shelter for them. So he was placed under round-the-clock surveillance, and search warrants were made to search his home and cab. He told the police that he was not afraid because fear was only for the guilty. The police literally took his life apart. They didn't find a single piece of evidence against him, so they decided to leave him alone. so many like women disappearing, and the previous detective on the case was ignoring all these women that were disappearing because he said he wasn't sure if they were related to the Green River killings. But this new detective was like, these women that are disappearing are probably related, so we should at least check them out, you know. On May 8th, 1983, a family was hunting for mushrooms when they stumbled upon Carol Christensen, who was a young woman. Her body was faced up, a paper sack was over her head, and her hands were folded over a bottle of wine. Over her hands were grinded up sausages, and on each of her shoulders was a trout. Detectives knew that this was a sign of a serial killer because he placed her this way so that he could come back and look at her like that, like she was a trophy. After this, the number of kills increased. The summer and fall of 1983, bodies of young women were found everywhere. Behind the baseball field, one body is found. South of the airport, 3 more bodies were discovered. By the end of 1983, 14 bodies were found, with 23 more women missing. Most of these women were either prostitutes or runaways. They decided to add one more task force on the case, but this made matters worse because they think this motivated the Green River killer to continue, unfortunately. By 1984, 14 more bodies were found. 4 were found near Star Lake, which was the killer's personal graveyard. As 1984 ended, the task force received letters from Ted Bundy, who was offering his help. They thought Ted Bundy was doing this because the Green River killer was taking attention away from his case. Bundy really enjoyed the attention. He didn't want to lose that much attention, so he wanted to help discover or figure out who the Green River killer was. 2 detectives from the case flew out and talked to Bundy. While being interrogated, I'm not sure. Bundy told them that they needed to focus on the dump sites where the bodies were found, because most serial killers return back to their dump sites. Bundy said that the Green River killer would return to each of the dump sites to have sex with the lifeless bodies. This is a quote from that interview. Bundy said, "In my opinion, the best chance you have of catching this guy red-handed is to get a site with a fresh body and stake it out." So, in essence, Bundy was saying they should wait for a new body to be found, a fresh body. Pretend that they didn't know about it. Watch it for a while and wait for the killer to return to the site. was very close to being the killer. And this was a local truck painter named Gary Leon Ridgway. A man claimed that he saw Gary with one of the missing girls in his pickup truck. Another woman who had said she had seen the Green River Killer provided a composite sketch that looked just like Gary. Detectives searched his home, but nothing connected Gary to the murdered or missing girls. And also, just a side note, Gary was still married during this time, so he was married to his third wife around this time, I'm pretty sure, so, all this was happening, and his family was basically very freaked out, but he told them that, yeah, they called me in for questioning, but, there was 500 other people there, there was a lot of suspects, so, it wasn't me, you guys need to calm down. He was, calming his family down, his wife, his son, he was calming everyone down. He was like, you guys, don't worry. The case went cold again for a little while. Now, there was an issue. They were running out of DNA to test people with to find the Green River Killer. So they couldn't test as many suspects as they wanted to. So let's say they had 500 suspects. If they had unlimited DNA, they could have tested every single one of them, including Gary, and figured out who the killer was. But because they had a limited amount, they could only test so few people, and they had to be so careful with it. So it was really hard. Until one doctor, I think her name is Begimic. I forgot her name, I'm so sorry. But I forgot her name, but this one doctor, she found a way to harvest a genetic profile of the killer's DNA. So in essence, what this means is that they could test as many people as they needed to. And, before there wasn't enough DNA to test all the subjects, but now there was enough DNA. So now they could test as many people as they wanted to. This gave them the ability to test Gary Leon Ridgway. And guess what? He was a match for 4 counts of murder. So basically they got DNA out of 4 bodies, right? So he was a match for away, and some of them might never be reported missing, so they were, in a way, the perfect victims. I feel sick saying this, like, it's just... Ridgway took detectives to all the sites, and he would tell them where the bodies were, and they would dig and dig and dig until they found them. But most of these supposed grave sites were empty. The task force was feeling unsatisfied, but the families did get some justice, knowing what happened to their daughters and loved ones and stuff. So on November 5th, 2003, Gary appeared in court and pleaded guilty to every single one of the 48 murders. The judge said each of the victims' names, one by one, and Gary pleaded guilty 48 times. But, like, so many women went missing around that time. Like, God knows, like, how many women, like, how many bodies they didn't find that Gary was guilty for killing. And, like, later on, Gary told some people that he had killed upwards of, like, 80 women. So, it was probably much more than 48 counts of murder. One man, because in the court, some of the families came to, watch the trial, and one man told him that he had forgiven Gary because God taught him to be forgiving, so he had forgiven Gary. Many of the victims left Gary in tears, though he did not face a death sentence. In December of 2003, a judge sentenced Ridgway to 48 life sentences with no possibility of parole. All these life sentences were to be served consecutively. He received an additional 480 years, and he would be imprisoned for the rest of his life, to spend alone in a prison cell with the memory of those he killed.